So Gomakovic reached out asking for tips when paddling alone. I think that's a great subject, so here's a list of 9 tips that I think could help you when you're paddling solo. I like following the rule of paddling with groups of at least 3 paddlers. The reason that works is if something happens to the first paddler, the second paddler can help the first paddler, while the third one can either call for help or go get help. It gives a little bit more safety for everybody to have a different role and then being able to actually go contact someone else. So that doesn't mean you should only paddle in groups. Paddling solo is absolutely fantastic, but what it does mean is that that safety net of having a couple more people is gone, so that means it's up to you to take care of all of those possible situations that might come up. Number 1 for me is weather. Not only understanding the forecast up to your trip and then during, but what if it does something completely unpredictable, which happens all the time, really strong winds or a storm rolls in. How would you be able to be prepared for all these different changes, because now you don't have other people to assist you, it's just you. What if you have an offshore wind? So understanding the weather, but then also that goes tied in with number 2, which is knowing the place very well. And if you don't know it is a new place that you're going to explore, then understanding and researching it as much as possible so that you know where to launch safely, you know where to land safely, you know what hazards are going to be there, what the tides, what the currents, if you're going to be out in open seas, how that will be affected by unpredictable weather. These are all things you can research ahead of time, and you might not be able to predict everything that happens, but what you can predict is what are possible scenarios, and then also try to plan alternate routes depending on what the weather or what the day might bring. You don't have to be a navigation whiz to paddle by yourself, but understand and plan your trip within your limits. So, and also make sure to take the right tools with you. So a chart, a compass, GPS, whatever you need to know where you are, because it's very easy to get disoriented when out on the water, and it's very easy to get lost. And if you need to call for help, you need to know exactly where you are, because people won't be able to get you otherwise. Number 3 for me is very important, and that's communication. The reason I think about it a lot is if you're with a group of people, it's very likely that someone within the group has a working device that could be easily used to call for help. But if it's just you, it's just up to you to have everything that you need if something happens to be able to call for help. So these are ways of letting someone else know that you're in trouble, so they can consist of a cell phone, a VHF radio, maybe it's a GPS with a locator device, it could be flares, it could be any kind of devices that you can use to let someone know if you're in trouble and you need help. Get the word out. So always make sure they're charged before you leave, take extra batteries if you need them, and then always remember that in cold weather, batteries will drain faster. So know that you can't really depend on them the way you would during warmer weather. Number 4 is crucial when you're paddling by yourself, and that's a float plan. I did a short video on it, you can see it here, but just a quick overview. Someone on land needs to know where you're going to be paddling, how long you're going to be on the water, what your itinerary is, and when you're going to be off the water. If you're not back in time, they need to be able to put into motion a way to get a hold of you or to look for you. Number 5 is more of a debate point because everybody likes to do it slightly differently, and that is dressing appropriately. I'm a firm believer in dressing for immersion. I think usually if we're paddling with a strong group of paddlers, we'll always underdress just a little bit because we know if something happens, we'll have other fellow paddlers to help us. But if you're paddling by yourself, let's say you get capsized and the wind takes your kayak, you need to be dressed so that you can call for help and just hang out on the water until help comes. And the same thing goes for communication devices. If for some reason the wind takes your kayak away and you're just stranded floating in the water, 1, your communications devices need to be in waterproof locations, or they need to be waterproof themselves, and 2, they need to be on you, because if the wind takes your kayak, how do you call for help? So if I'm going to do a solo paddle, I like to err on the side of safety, because I know that if I find myself in the situation where I'm going to be in the water for a while, I'd rather be comfortable, I'd rather be warm while I'm waiting for help. Number 6, having a spare paddle. That depends on how far you're going. If you're going to be close by in a beautiful lake, no big deal. But if you're going to be paddling for a while and the wind takes your paddle or it breaks, I know some people love paddle leashes, other people hate them. Up to you to decide that, but I like having a spare paddle because if something happens to my main paddle and I'm miles and miles away from my put-in, I can easily come back and not have to use my hands to paddle. Number 7 applies all the time, but especially if you're going solo, and that is having a safety kit, a repair kit, having sunblock, so things that you might need when you're out on the water to protect yourself, and if something happens to your kayak, be able to fix it so that you can get home safely. Number 8, I think everyone needs to do no matter what boat you have, no matter what you're doing, and that is understanding what to do in the event of a capsize. How do you get back in your kayak? Because if you have a group of people, sure, they can help you do it. If you're on your own, it's a lot harder to do it on the very first time than you think. And every time you try, it gets a little harder. You get more and more tired, and if the water's cold, it's even worse. So understand the limits of your kayak. If the water's warm, go out and play. Throw yourself in the water, see what it's like to capsize, and then practice re-entries. Do you have a roll? Do you do a scramble? Do you use a paddle float? Whatever type of recovery you do, know how to do it inside out before you paddle solo. And the last thing I think about when I'm going to paddle solo, which I do with other people as well, but especially if I'm paddling by myself, and that is plenty of food and plenty of water. It's always a good idea to think and pack a little bit extra just in case. So that's the list that I usually think about when I'm paddling solo. I usually think about that when I'm paddling with other people as well. It is always safer to paddle with other people, but it is fantastic to paddle by yourself. It's just, I have to understand that the safety net is removed and it's up to you to be prepared for anything that does come up. So I hope that was helpful. Please reach out with any questions or comment below if you want to share what you do for doing your solo adventures. Please subscribe if you'd like. I'm always trying to put these videos out, and as always, look over Kayak Hipster. Thank you for watching. See you next time.